Thanks everyone so much for tuning in to our November SEARAC community call. For folks who are joining us, our calls, the purpose is to really keep our communities informed of the work that SEARAC is doing. And joining me today are Katrina Dizon Mariategui, who is our Director of National Policy, and also Alyssa Tilibet, our Training Manager. And Katrina's voice is actually going out, so she's going to be here for my support physically and the team's morale, but her voice is really scratchy, so I'll be covering her sections that she prepared. And thank you so much, Katrina, for your awesome work in preparing the content for today's call, which we hope folks will find really informative. So for those who are joining us for the first time, just to cover a couple logistics, a reminder that all attendees are currently placed on mute, and if you'd like to make a comment or a question during our time together today, you'll have to be logged in to the actual webinar platform. You can also ask questions or make a comment during the webinar, and we'll address them during our Q&A period. And if you'd like to do that, feel free to take a look at your control panel. And on the left, you'll see a bar that says questions. You can go ahead and type your question or comment under that question section and direct them to us as the webinar organizers. And also, just as a reminder, this webinar is going to be recorded and shared on social media later this week. So you'll be able to access the webinar itself as well as the resources that we'll share throughout today's conversation. And we also start our calls with getting to know you all and who is joining us today through some interactive polls. So the first one we'll pull up is to ask folks where you are joining us from today. Perhaps the East Coast, the West Coast, the Midwest, or the South. And we'll give folks about a minute to weigh in, and then we'll close out the poll and share our results. And we'll keep it open just for another 10 seconds for folks to share where you're joining from today. Great, so we'll go ahead and close the poll and share the results with folks. So it looks like East Coast and West Coast representation is really high, and we actually don't have anyone from the Midwest or the South on with us today. So thank you to our West Coast folks for joining us during your lunchtime, and our East Coast friends who are joining us for the end of our late afternoon. We really appreciate folks making time in their day, especially towards the end of the year when we're wrapping up and things are also getting busy. And then our next polling question is to ask if this is your first time attending a SEARAC community call. And again, we'll keep this open for about 30 seconds and have you all weigh in. And we'll give folks just another 10 seconds to share if this is your first time attending a SEARAC community call. Great, so we'll go ahead and close out our poll and share our results with folks. So it looks like over 80% of folks on the call today are actually returners. Thank you all so much for staying engaged with SEARAC. This is actually a different trend from what we've seen in the past couple months. So really grateful for folks who are returning for these community calls. And we'll start with just giving folks an overview of the agenda for today. We're going to cover a couple overall updates on civic engagement and the election results of 2018. some great news about a national equity agenda that SEARAC has put together, followed by policy updates and areas where you can take action in joining SEARAC's communities. And we'll close out with Q&A and comments from the community. So beginning with our update on the 2018 elections, what we saw was that 2018 was a really important election year for the Southeast Asian American community. And on election day, our communities elected those who they would believe would fight for justice and equity. At SEARAC, we looked at the 49 congressional districts in the country who have high populations of Southeast Asian Americans, defined by 1% or more of the population, as oftentimes it's a 1% margin that can swing votes and lead to a victory or a defeat in any election. So when we looked at these top 49 districts, we saw that a total of 8 of those 49 districts turned blue, thanks to voters in California, Texas, and Minnesota. In California, all but one of our districts are now led by Democratic congressional members, so that 20 of the 21 highest Southeast Asian American districts now have Democratic representatives. In Texas, we saw that the percentage of Democratic districts who serve high Southeast Asian American populations also doubled, with 4 of 8 districts in Texas now led by Democratic representatives. And in Minnesota, 2 seats were flipped, including representatives of many of the Minnesota 8 families, which is a huge testament to their power in organizing to get out the vote in their community. So overall, that leaves 8 of the 49 districts led by Republican congressional members and 41 of the 49 districts led by Democrats. At SEARAC, we're blown away by the historical voter turnout of 2018, and we're so inspired to see how our communities are going to continue to harness the power of voting for our 2020 presidential election. As part of our work in looking forward to 2019 and 2020, SEARAC recently launched our National Southeast Asian American Equity Agenda, which highlights our policy priorities for the next 2 years. This agenda was informed by over 30 interviews with our partner organizations from around the country who work to serve and empower and advocate on behalf of Southeast Asian American communities nationwide. Through this process, we affirmed our community's fight for self-determination to build equity through 4 major pillars. 1, our right to be counted, to ensure that our communities are made visible through the census. 2nd, our right to be seen and served through equitable education policies that address the needs of our students. 3rd, our right to heal through health policies that address intergenerational trauma of war, displacement, and poverty. And finally, our right to family through immigration policies that unite and not divide us. Just as a reminder, this equity agenda is available in our uploads section of the GoToWebinar platform. And our hope is that the agenda may also be used for our community's civic engagement work for the next 2 years to elect leaders who care about these issues and keep them accountable in the decisions that they make, and making sure that those decisions are actually aligned to the priorities that we have heard about from our communities as being really critical to our community's health and wellness. And with that as an overview, we'll move into some national policy updates on the issues that we're working on. And again, many thanks to Katrina and the policy team for helping to provide this content. So we'll begin with an update on our education work. And because lots of folks are not new time callers, you may already be familiar with the challenges that our communities face in obtaining higher education. And in particular, our census data reveals that over 50% of Southeast Asian students have not attended college for any period of time, compared to less than 40% of white students. And as individuals and students from low-income refugee communities who are the first in their families to attend post-secondary education, many youth face multiple barriers to obtaining a college degree. That's why in 2007, SEARAC actually introduced and passed a law to create the ANA-PC program, which is called the Asian American and Native American Pacific Islander Serving Institution, to provide additional funding to institutions who enroll a significant proportion of low-income AAPI and Native American students. Through this law, a grant program was created so that schools could actually apply to create support programs for low-income first-generation Asian American students, including Southeast Asian American students. Unfortunately, what we know about the program is that the law itself is going to be finalizing in September 2019. And so if Congress doesn't pass a law, the funding for this program is not going to continue. With Asian American and Pacific Islander students being the fastest growing population in the U.S. and a sizable portion being Southeast Asian American students who are still seeking college success, these schools that serve our communities really need to be well equipped to make sure that every student has the resources they need. And currently, our assessment is that the current level of funding just is not meeting the needs that we see. And that's why SEARAC is advocating to protect the ANA-PC program and ensure that it continues to be funded. And we also believe that institutions that serve multiple communities of color should be allowed to apply for multiple funding streams instead of having to choose between communities that are both in need. So for example, many schools in California serve a high population of low-income Latinx and AAPI students, and we believe that they should be eligible for funding to support both communities of students, which is why we're also supporting efforts to allow schools to apply to multiple grants that would meet their student population's needs rather than just the ANA-PC grant. And finally, the ANA-PC funding program is one small thing that Congress can do to ensure that all of our students are getting the resources and support they need to be successful, which is why SEARAC will continue to make sure that Congress knows why this program matters for our communities. And with that update, we wanted to pause just to give folks an opportunity to weigh in on the ANA-PC program. And our polling question is, if you know anyone that would be impacted if the ANA-PC funding were cut. The options are yes, myself, yes, students in my community, not sure, I need more information, or no. And we'll keep it open just for about another 30 seconds. Great. So we'll go ahead and close out and share the results with folks. So it looks like a majority of folks on the call today know of students in your community who would be impacted, followed by those who might need more information and those who wouldn't be impacted. So this is super helpful and helps to affirm for SEARAC that more information is needed on the program, and also that it is an important program that our community members are looking towards us for leadership and protecting. And shifting to our next policy issue is health. For those who are new to our community, we often share that Southeast Asian Americans experience unique health and mental health challenges as survivors of war and as those who experience high levels of poverty here in the U.S. And because of this, our communities disproportionately suffer from health challenges such as hepatitis B. The Hmong and Vietnamese community are also at higher risk of cervical cancer compared to other racial and ethnic groups. And many Southeast Asian American elders are also diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder from the war. In the Cambodian community, one research study found that over 60% of those who are surveyed actually experience PTSD. And we also know that these disparities are compounded with the challenges of accessing culturally and linguistically competent healthcare, especially given that 40% of our communities speak English less than very well compared to just 8% of U.S. families. And in addition, many of our communities continue to experience high rates of poverty, which also exacerbate the challenges around accessing healthcare itself. For these reasons, the Health Equity and Accountability Act is a policy that we're looking to that would actually benefit many Southeast Asian American communities to access quality health and mental health services. It was introduced by Representative Lee of California in May of this year, and Senator Hirono of Hawaii just introduced the Senate version yesterday. We at SEARAC support this bill because it would improve the collection and reporting of disaggregated data to understand and to address the factors impacting our community's health. And it also creates culturally and linguistically appropriate health and mental health services to address the unique needs of our immigrant and refugee communities. And with that update, we'll pause again to get a sense from folks on your analysis on what provisions of the Health Equity and Accountability Act do you think would help Southeast Asian American communities the most? The options are collection of disaggregated data, creation of systems to holistically address health, culturally and linguistically appropriate health and mental health services, or all of the above. And we'll give folks about another 10 seconds to weigh in. Great. Thank you folks for weighing in. So y'all shared that all of the above is super important, and we absolutely agree because we believe that holistic healthcare requires holistic approaches, which are part of the HIA policy. And finally, our last issue update is around immigration. What we know about immigration for our community is that at least 16,000 Southeast Asian American community members have received final orders of removal since 1998, a majority of them due to old criminal records for sentences that they've already served. Last year, we saw the largest detention roundup of Cambodian and Vietnamese community members following visa sanctions on Cambodia and increased pressure on the Vietnamese government to expand the deportation of refugees who arrived in the U.S. prior to 1995. The Trump administration has only escalated these attacks this year by sanctioning Laos and also keeping the drumbeat of deportations to Cambodia at a record high level. This month, we are proud to share that our advocacy has led to Representatives Judy Chu of California and Pramila Jayapal of Washington State in their leadership of leading a House congressional letter to the Department of Homeland Security denouncing the unjust detention and deportation of Southeast Asian Americans. And in this letter, our congressional leaders also encourage the use of prosecutorial discretion, which is a policy that was used under the Obama administration to weigh both the positive and negative factors of deporting an individual instead of just pushing for mass deportations overall. This letter is open to all House members to sign on to with a deadline of December 13th. And last year, a similar letter received 14 signatures from House members, and this year we would love to increase that goal. As advocacy organization pushing for this letter, we're also still looking for a Senate champion who will coordinate a similar effort on the Senate side. This effort is important because detention and deportations are ongoing, and we need congressional champions to speak up for the Southeast Asian American community, and we need people in the long term who we can go to champion long-term policy solutions. And at SEARAC, we believe that the first step is making sure that your opinions as congressional leaders are on the record. And from there, we can look to these leaders for continued leadership and actually introducing policies and bills to change these conditions for our communities. And with that update, we will pause for our poll to ask if folks have ever called or met with their senator or congressperson to ask for their support on a policy that you care about. The options are yes, I consider myself a strong advocate. Yes, I could, but could always use more resources and guidance. No, I don't know how to reach out to them. No, I don't know what to ask for their support on. And no, I'm intimidated by the process. And we'll leave the poll open for just about another 10 seconds. Awesome. Thank y'all for sharing with us that a lot of you are really badass advocates and that close to 70% are strong advocates, but you could always use more resources and guidance. And that there are some folks who are intimidated by the process, and that is totally normal and part of the advocacy journey of learning how simple it actually is. So in our action steps, we'll talk through a couple really easy ways for folks to start joining us on this process. There was also a question if new House electeds can sign on to the letter, and unfortunately the answer is no for this letter. It is only open to those who are currently in Congress, but we thank you for that great question. And we hope that those new folks will join on to a letter next year that will continue pushing to make sure we get more congressional support. And in the next section of our call, we wanted to share actions that folks can join us in supporting SEARAC's advocacy efforts. So the first thing that you can do around our deportation work is to sign on to a public statement that we have created to denounce the deportations of Southeast Asian Americans at bit.ly and Southeast Asian American deportations. You can also call your members of Congress to advocate for the policies that we talked about today, including funding for the ANA-PC program, including signing on as a co-sponsor to the Health Equity and Accountability Act. If they have, feel free to thank them. And also to ask for their support and actually opposing increased funding for the Department of Homeland Security and efforts to build a wall or to hire additional ICE agents and increasing prisons and detention beds. If you need guidance or talking points on actually contacting your members of Congress, please feel free to reach out to our policy team directly. Katrina's email is going to be shared at the end of this PowerPoint, and we are happy to provide folks with a script and also phone numbers and email addresses that you can use to contact your member of Congress. In addition to the legislative actions that you can take, we also wanted to give folks an update on the campaigns that we're running around a couple key issues. So the first of those issues is Census 2020. As folks may recall from our past webinar, SEARAC is monitoring the efforts to make sure that we have a full, fair, and accurate 2020 census count. The information collected to the census determines how $675 billion of federal funding is distributed to states every year, and it also determines our political representation. And 2020 is also a really important year for the Southeast Asian American community because it actually marks our community's 50th year in the U.S. So at SEARAC, we are more committed than ever to commemorate this 50th year anniversary by getting out a strong count so that our communities can be counted and that we grow our political muscles and power. And the census is also the only national data set that includes disaggregated data to reveal the needs in our community. So we want to make sure that we're able to come out to represent and to protect this data source from continuing to be part of who we are as America. So this summer, we mobilized a comment collection campaign to oppose the addition of a question that would ask if you're a citizen and to expand the collection and reporting of race and ethnicity data. Thanks to your support, we were able to collect almost 900 individual comments and 50 organizational comments. The deadline to finalize the questionnaire is approaching, but unfortunately, due to a number of lawsuits challenging the Trump administration's addition of the citizenship question, we may not know for sure if this question will be included in the 2020 questionnaire. Right now, the deadline is supposed to be about February or March, and the lawsuits are going to, the final deadline is going to really be dependent on how these lawsuits pan out. And regardless of the outcome, we want to make sure that SEARAC continues to monitor what is going on in the census, and as soon as possible, starting our education and mobilization efforts for our community to show up and to be counted for years and years to come. And as part of our planning around our census strategy, we have created a questionnaire to hear from folks like you on resources that would be the most helpful for you to have in your community to make sure that folks are counted, especially early education that can happen in 2019 as well as 2020. So we started a bit.ly. You can access it at bit.ly SEARAC Census to share your feedback with us on what resources would be most helpful. And because we have you today, we're going to ask one of those questions, which is, what type of materials do you think would be most beneficial to your community to be educated on the census? Our options are webinars, fact sheets, radio PSAs, television PSAs, or print PSAs. And I'd say the public service announcements are focused on ethnic media. And we'll give folks about 20 seconds to respond. Great, thanks so much for responding, folks, and we'll go ahead and share the results. So it looks like folks would like television public service announcements followed by radio and print first, then television followed by radio, fact sheets, and webinars. So this is super helpful. This helps to affirm for us on the type of resources that we want to create with the resources that we do have. And if folks do have time to fill out our bit.ly survey, please feel free to share your feedback with us there too. We'll use all of this information as we finalize our 2019 strategy and determining the types of resources we'll be able to produce. And finally, the second campaign that we have been focused on is our public charge campaign. We've been mobilizing a comment collection campaign again, similar to census, but this time our work is to oppose the administration's proposal on their public charge ruling that would force immigrants to choose between accessing critical health, nutrition, and housing benefits and protecting their immigration status. So what this means is that if you're in immigration without a green card currently, and you are accessing benefits such as Medicaid or Section 8 housing, and you want to apply for a green card, that this application could in fact be denied because you would be deemed a public charge by accessing these benefits. We know that for SEARAC's communities in 2016, 87% of immigrants came from Cambodia, 96% from Laos, and 97% from Vietnam, were those who received a green card and were able to do so through family-based visa petitions. And while refugees are exempt from our public charge determination, low-income Southeast Asian Americans arriving here through family visas would likely be the most vulnerable to be impacted by this proposed rule. Because our communities have a unique perspective and responsibility to speak out as the largest refugee community to ever resettle in the U.S., relied on government support to help us live and thrive in America. We're standing up to protect this. These benefits for all immigrant communities, regardless of their immigration status. And if you would like to join us, you can take action by helping us to reach our 1,000 comments goal. So far, we've collected 363 comments. The deadline is December 10th, and we could use all the help that we can get in reaching our goal of 1,000. To take action, you could submit a comment through the bit.ly SEARAC public charge, or you could text One Nation SEARAC to 52886. You can also help SEARAC to collect additional comments. In the uploads form, you'll see that there is a sample collection form. And if you'd like to print this out and share it with folks in your community, feel free to email it back to us and we'll input that comment directly. And finally, if you're likely to be impacted or if you know someone who could be impacted, please share your story with us because we want to make sure that our community's voices are heard loud and clear. And you can email monica@searac.org. And finally, we'd also like to encourage folks to check out a couple resources that we've developed around public charge, including our toolkit. Here you'll find background information as well as talking points and additional ways to take action. You'll also be able to access some resources here from our GoToWebinar resources, including translated fact sheets and our printable comment collection form that I mentioned just a little bit before. And with that update, we'd like to ask folks if they'd be interested in receiving SEARAC updates, community alerts, and engagement through text. And we ask this because we are testing out new ways to engage our communities and new ways for folks to take action really quickly. So the options are yes or no. And we'll give folks about another 15 seconds to respond. Great. Thanks so much, folks, for sharing. And we'll go ahead and share that 64% of folks today would like to be alerted by text. And this is more than we anticipated. So this is really great encouragement to the SEARAC team for going forward with testing out our text messaging mobilization and seeing how that goes and keeping folks connected and mobilized. And finally, for folks who might be on our listserv or our social media, you will know that this is our end-of-year fundraising drive week. We have set an ambitious goal to raise $20,000 by tomorrow, end of day Friday, November 30th. And our fundraising goal really is to prepare us for 2019 as our organization's 40th year anniversary. So next year, SEARAC turns 40. And we're determined to enter it strong and bold because we know that we still have a lot of work to do to defend against attacks from the current administration. And we also really want to leverage the momentum from the midterm elections that our communities nationwide have helped to create in shifting the political climate of our nation and to really help grow a Southeast Asian American civil rights movement. And finally, this fundraising drive is really to also meet the rising demands of our community in the encouragement that you all have provided to us today. So for example, in our last couple calls, we have asked folks how often would you like to join a community call, and we heard our community loud and clear in hearing that folks would like monthly calls and that you all value the type of content that we're providing. Last year we did quarterly calls, and with your encouragement, we are shifting our resources so that these monthly calls can happen. In addition to that, we also hear our community in our applications to our annual Leadership and Advocacy Training Program, our LAT program. For folks who don't know, it's a 3-day advocacy training program that brings advocates, about 45 folks to our nation's capital to learn how to advocate with their members of Congress. We've graduated 1,200 folks from over 40 states, a little bit under 1,200. 40 states in the past 20 years. And each year we get more and more applications. In 2017, we received about 100, close to 150. And in 2018, we surpassed 150 at about 175 is what Alyssa is whispering to me as the organizer of the LAT. Every year it is a heart-aching process to have to say no to applicants who are so strong and who are so committed. But because of our limited resources, we're only able to accept between 40 and 45 participants each year. And as an alumni from the program, I can testify to how powerful it has been as part of my own leadership journey. And because of that, our fundraising drive is really focused on helping SEARAC to meet the demands that we hear from you. And so we're asking for your support and generosity in donating to SEARAC this year so that together we're building our community's resilience for our 40th anniversary and beyond. This year we have 11 team members who are already so close to helping to raise $20,000 for SEARAC. I think we're at about $19,000 right now. And if you are so inspired to join us, you can do that by going to www.searac.org and clicking on the Donate tab, which will take you to our donation website. And if you give $100 or more this year, your donation will actually be matched by one of our foundation partners so that you are doubling your support to SEARAC. And with that, we will go ahead and pause now to open up our line for a Q&A. So just a couple ground rules for folks who will be joining us, especially if you'd like to join by audio. To keep in mind 3 quick ground rules. One is to please respect different points of view. Secondly, please share your name and organization if you're with an organization. And finally, provide your remarks within 2 minutes, which will allow us to get through as many participants as possible. And also as a reminder, you can also ask a comment, make a comment or ask a question through your questions tab. And if you're joining us by audio, feel free to click on the hand icon, which you'll see on the far left menu. And it looks like we have a question on how can a community advocate for the pardon of formerly incarcerated individuals. And Katrina is inspired to respond to this question, and we'll see how her throat does. But thank you for this question.
Hi, everyone. I apologize for my voice, but thank you for asking that question. As many of you know, there's been a lot of momentum this year around the pardon process, providing hope to many community members who are at risk of deportation. A number of community members have been reaching out to SEARAC and others in the community to support in the process. And some things that you could do to support these individuals, I think one simple thing is oftentimes they ask people to submit letters basically testifying the content of their character. You know, why does this individual deserve to have a pardon? What are the contributions that this individual gives to their community? SEARAC is an organization that has written a number of these letters. So if you know of individuals trying to seek a pardon, we're definitely open to supporting in that way. You can feel free to shoot us a request through my email at katrina@searac.org. In addition to that, I think just ongoing community education to encourage others in your community to support in that effort as well. As many of you folks know, trying to stop the deportation of those that were formerly incarcerated is oftentimes an uphill battle. And sometimes just educating our community members and our friends, communicating with members of Congress, encouraging them to also engage in the pardon process, I think will go a long way and can also give a lot of basically hope and inspiration for the individual who is trying to stop their deportation by undergoing this process.
Great, thank you so much, Katrina. And we have another question related to immigration. The question is, please comment on the recent disclosure that DHS or ICE will no longer attempt to remove Vietnamese immigrants who arrived in the U.S. prior to July 1995 and have old criminal convictions and removal orders.
So as folks recall, last year we did see the largest roundup and detention of Vietnamese immigrants, and folks were very concerned because about 12 of those individuals that ended up being deported were pre-95 arrivals. And for folks to know, the current MOU between Vietnam and the United States states that those that came into the country as refugees prior to 95 should largely be protected from deportation. And because the administration sought to deport these people, there was a large outcry from the Vietnamese community. There was also a large outcry from high-level officials at the Vietnamese embassy. And I believe that in August of this year, there was a meeting between both US and Vietnamese officials. And what came out of that meeting was basically DHS saying that they would respect the terms of the MOU by not detaining and deporting refugees that came prior to 1995. And this is definitely very good news and like very, very hopeful for many community members. For those that are following the lawsuit filed by our partners with the Asian Law Caucus, they're now in the process of releasing a number of pre-95 folks that were detained because DHS is unable to deport them. However, we want to continue to be vigilant, as we know it's difficult to trust this administration. They have oftentimes said one thing and gone back on their word. And, you know, we don't know what the future holds. We know that they will continue to basically attack and discriminate against many immigrants and refugees. So we definitely welcome this news, but we encourage community members to remain engaged, continue to educate their community, and continue to mobilize if they see an uptick in attacks once again in the Vietnamese community.
Awesome, great, thank you so much. Another immigration question is, how long can an individual be legally detained?
So according to a Supreme Court case that was argued a couple of years back, an immigrant shouldn't be detained for longer than a 6-month period if the United States government is not able to show that they can be deported in a reasonable amount of time. But in reality, that is often not what happens. The government can usually appeal this decision. They can say that they're pressuring the government and foreign governments, and they feel like they're close to deporting this individual. And in reality, we've seen individuals being detained for months longer and even years at a time. For instance, a number of our Minnesota 8 family members were detained for a minimum of a couple of months to over a year. So although legally and what's written in the laws, they can't be detained for more than 6 months, oftentimes that's not what we're seeing in reality. And we encourage folks that if you know of individuals in the situation, to contact an attorney to help you assess your legal options.
Great, thank you so much, Katrina. And we still have time for a couple more questions or comments if you would like to share them with us. So one of our questions we got is, can you tell us a little bit more about SEARAC's Census Strategy? And our work in the next couple of years is really going to be focused on inspiring and encouraging a strong Southeast Asian American count by being really visible and through that, through being counted, building our political power for the next generation. Essentially, in 2019, our goal is going to be around convening a coalition of Southeast Asian American leaders in key states who will mobilize their communities in both outreach and education and also mobilization. In 2019, we'll also be focused on developing educational materials based off of the final questionnaire, and depending on whether the citizenship question is added or not, this will require either a lot of education to make sure that folks feel safe and inspired to respond, or a little bit less. But in either case, our work is going to be focused on getting out those materials to y'all so that we can educate our communities as quickly as possible. And then in 2020, providing support to community organizations through sub-grants so that you have capacity on the ground to do canvassing, to get volunteers out and getting out the word to communities and neighborhoods, and collectively get us to getting a really strong Southeast Asian American count. And we have a couple other questions. One is, how should we reach out to our senators regarding the Chu and Jayapal letter?
So the letter by Representative Chu and Jayapal, currently that's on the House side. So we do encourage folks to reach out to your representatives if you're comfortable. And just mention that this letter is out. we would encourage their support. And if they have any questions or concerns, they can feel free to reach out to me at katrina@searac.org. I believe the last count that we had from this morning, I think we had a total of about 7 signatures so far, but we still have a deadline of weeks away. And our policy team is actually trying to hit a target of 30, which is more than double of last year. And I'm really actually confident that we can meet that target. In terms of the Senate side, we've been in negotiations with a number of offices. I think more recently with Senator Hirono's office of Hawaii. However, there has not been a firm commitment yet on the letter for the Senate side. But we, as always, encourage folks to also reach out to the senators just to educate them on the deportations happening in the community. We know that another roundup is scheduled for December of this year, right before the holidays. And if we're not able to get a Senate letter out this year, we do want to continue to encourage senators to maybe consider hosting something in the new year with the 116th Congress.
Great. And this next question is, does SEARAC have any good resources for helping to find local leaders and advocacy groups to partner with? This is a really good question. Internally, we have a list of community-based organizations from across the country. We have about over 40 that we work with consistently in states ranging from California to Minnesota to Texas and Washington. And I think the easiest route is probably emailing our team to share with us where you're interested in finding partners. You can reach me at quinn@searac.org. And as a long-term strategy, we could also think about revamping what used to be a community partners list on our website, because a lot of community folks generally want to know who they can connect with, and perhaps that's a resource that we can redevelop so that folks can access that online really quickly. So we really appreciate that question. And we'll stay on maybe just for another 30 seconds to see if folks have any other questions before we close out. Great. Hearing none, we want to thank you all again for your engagement with SEARAC and for your support of SEARAC. For any of the information presented today, please feel free to contact myself or Katrina. If you have a question about fundraising, please reach out to our awesome Director of Communications and Development, Elaine, at elaine@searac.org. Also, to be on a lookout for our application for our Leadership and Advocacy Training Program, which will likely open in February. So if we don't have a community call before then, please make sure that you're added to our listserv so that you can get these updates, the LOAT application, which we would encourage you to share with your community so that we have a really strong application pool. And finally, thank you again for joining us, as we hope that this information was helpful as we continue to fight and protect our right to live and thrive in America. Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays and take care. Until next time.